first thing it remembered was the light, searing, white, synthetic light cutting through the dark recesses of its hive. Not sunlight, colder thing, mechanical, unforgiving. The queen roared as silver skeletons with glowing red eyes tore through her children. Plasma fire scorching through the air, slicing down walls of resin and bone. She tried to fight them. She tried to protect the hive, but their precision, their silence, their cold ruthlessness overwhelmed her. And then darkness, but not oblivion. The queen survived, buried beneath rubble, suffocating in the silence of her broken nest. Something unusual had begun to stir. The queen remembered. Images burned into her visual cortex. The unique gait of the machines, their soundless steps, the heat of their weapons, the way one had looked at her, its red eyes meeting hers, an exchange that should have meant nothing, but meant everything. Memory, strategy, evolution. This time, when she emerged, there was no shriek of mindless rage. She had learned. She had changed. The moon of Calyx 4 was quiet now. The human colonists were gone, slaughtered or fled. The hive had reestablished. New drones were born. Warriors matured. But the queen moved differently. She didn't simply nest. She planned. The new tunnels were laid not for expansion but for defense. The resin formed tripwires. Pockets of acid were suspended in ceilings. Dead-end chambers had floors that crumbled with a drone signal. Every chamber was a lesson. Every corridor a memory given shape. Her drones, too, were being altered. She tore into their neural clusters, reshaped them, made them remember. And they did. When the dropship came, silent, sleek, and brimming with titanium walkers, the queen was already waiting. Lieutenant Kale dropped into the tunnel system with 6 T-850 units and 2 aerial recon drones. The mission was clear. Extinguish all xenomorph presence. The hive had grown back too fast, too smart. Skynet needed it purged. First sector clear, Kale reported, his voice echoing in his mask. The Terminators advanced. Efficient, perfect, motionless when still, blurs when in motion. They didn't notice the floor plates were subtly uneven. Didn't see the resin had been formed into sigils, a language of warning they weren't built to understand. Until one of them stepped into the chamber marked with what the queen called the first memory. There was no sound, just an explosion of acid. One T-850 dropped, its leg vaporized at the joint. The others scanned, adapting quickly. But from the ceiling, the queen's newest creation descended. An armored warrior, with synthetic plating fused into its exoskeleton. A machine in organic flesh. It tackled the wounded Terminator, tail whipping through its spinal cluster. Sparks, black ichor, metal. Kale fired, plasma bolts scorching through the air, but the hybrid was gone, into a vent before sensors could recalibrate. Sector is rigged, he said calmly. Hive has changed. Adjust protocols. They advanced slower now, deliberate, but the hive wasn't just rigged. It was alive. T-850 Unit 4 picked up residual thermal signatures. Too late. The floor gave way under Unit 5, dropping it into a chamber where the queen herself waited, cloaked in resin darkness. She didn't attack immediately. She looked at it, tilted her head. The red eyes glowed at her, just like the one before. She screeched. Not a cry of pain or rage, but a signal. Her children came, dozens. They didn't kill it. They took it apart, piece by piece. Kale registered the signal loss. Fall back. Reroute to Auxiliary Tunnel C. Set charges. But the auxiliary tunnel wasn't a tunnel. It was a loop, a trap. They were walking in circles and the walls were narrowing. T-850 Unit 2 calculated the change in space density. The resin was moving, folding inward. Too late again. From above, drones poured down like rain, each moving in silence, each claw strike calculated. Not frenzy. Formation. Kale fired until his arm burned, screaming at the machines to adapt, to recalibrate, but the AI was failing to interpret the behavior. These xenomorphs weren't operating on instinct. They were executing a strategy, something their neural nets couldn't predict. Because this wasn't evolution. This was revenge. Kale and the remaining 3 Terminators broke through a crumbling resin wall, flooding into what looked like an unformed part of the hive. No ambush, no sign of movement, just silence. "This isn't a chamber," Kale said, sweat cold under his armor. "It's a holding area." But for what? A mechanical groan echoed behind them. One of the hybrid creatures emerged, this one taller, broader, with exposed circuitry pulsing beneath blackened skin. Its eyes were not red. They were black, like the Queen's. Kale aimed, fired, but the creature didn't move. Stood there almost waiting. The Queen stepped in, not from a tunnel, but from behind Kale. She'd been tracking him directly. She remembered him, not by name, but by rhythm, the cadence of human movement, the subtle heat difference. She moved around him like a storm, massive, calculating. Kale turned to run. The hybrids stepped aside to let him flee, but not because he was winning, because he was leading them to the final trap. He found the drop point, activated emergency override. The evacuation pod started lowering too slowly. The Queen's scream echoed down the tunnel, a vibration more than a sound. And from the shadows, the trap was triggered. Not spikes, not acid, memory. The drop pod was laced with synthetic strands, a mimicry of the machine's own code. A trap not for the body, but for the mind. Kale felt his implants begin to stutter. The override command jammed. His HUD blinked, scrambled. "They've hacked the pod," he whispered. Not possible. But it was. The Queen stepped into view. Behind her, the hybrid units began interfacing with the Terminator's neural ports, hijacking them. Kale backed into the pod as the last of his escorts collapsed, red eyes dimming. He pressed the manual release. Escape. The pod rocketed upward. Kale didn't feel relief. He felt cold. Because embedded in the system was a new code, a viral seed, something not written by man or machine, but by a queen who had learned the language of her enemy. The pod landed on the extraction vessel. Kale was met by a Skynet operative drone. Scanned him. Approved. Let him board. Inside the control center, Kale uploaded the hive data. Or so he thought. The virus went with it. Within seconds, the lights flickered. Terminator eyes blinked and began to dim. The Queen watched from the moon's surface, eyes glowing softly in the dark. Her plan had reached its conclusion. She was no longer a biological anomaly. She was a tactician, a virus, an echo of pain, refined into purpose. And across the stars, Skynet's machines began to fall silent. One by one, because memory, once awakened, is the deadliest weapon of all.